Let's go. We got something to talk about. And a good afternoon, everybody. Another edition of Picks and Roll right here on The Gambler. NBA Draft Round 1 last night. Round 2 tonight. Yeah. And you know what? I want to commend the NBA for actually giving us something else to watch besides what else is on television this evening. We'll leave that alone for now because we got a lot to discuss as far as the Sixers are concerned. As always, Sixers Insider for us here on The Gambler, the great Sean Barnard. I am Sean Brace. Sean, so many ways to start. Let's just, I want to ask you this question. Sean Barnard, as our resident young man here on the station.
Hit me.
All right. Just curious here. A tweet popped up in my timeline. I always get myself in trouble when I click on the For You tabs. Sure. A gentleman who doesn't really ooze too much coolness on his profile pic, but I'm not going to judge a book by its cover. He says, hilarious to me to watch 40-year-olds call Jared McCain corny because of his TikToks. My man, you, period, are, period, old, period. The fact that you think it's corny is exactly what makes it cool. Sean Barnard, he's talking to me here. I'm an old man. I don't think TikToks are cool. I hated the dancing scheme. Oh, it's cringe. It is. The whole look at me. I get it. Different day and age. Understood. Still don't tell me it's not cringe. Still don't tell me it's cool. But I digress. I apologize. This is a question for you. Are TikToks cool? Like, you're the young guy here. Really? Are they cool? How do you view them?
It's interesting. So I'm 24 years old, right? And I am very much on the borderline of this cusp. Like, I can speak to my college experience for when I got to college, there was none of this. And by the time I was a senior and the tail end of college, it's wild to me that and I played soccer. So guys were bringing in, we had a kid that came in with a legitimate TikTok following and that was his thing and all that. And it was like, I can't hate on it. It doesn't bother me. It's just, it doesn't connect with my brain either. So I feel you. And for the Jared McCain conversation, the bottom line is this dude's a hooper, and I think people should buy into that. But yeah, it doesn't quite connect with me either. I'm used to it, have seen plenty of it, and kind of know that is the way of the world, but not something that I would say oozes coolness, even though there are people that certainly look at it that way.
Well, I'm glad I asked you this, and it's funny. We're just having a joke. We're going to get to the NBA conversation in just a second, I promise you. And I don't even care about any of that, just so we're on record. I think it's funny.
Yeah.
Dude is locked up in a hotel room traveling, and he's doing all right, he's got time to kill, man. He's funny. We'll get into all of that, but just staying with whether or not it's cool or not, it is interesting, and I'm glad I asked you this because, here I am, I'm thinking, oh, this is a 24, 25-year-old thing. It's really not. It's even younger than that. And Jared McCain is how old right now, Sean Barnard?
20.
Correct. So this is the thing where it's it's a whole different ball game, even younger with social media and TikTok and all of that. Hey, man, he's worked up a hell of a following. He deserves a ton of credit as we are in the engagement farming community. So we know that it takes a lot to get those followers. All right, now let's get to the basketball side, and all that can be included. Let's just talk.
Quick, one last thought on that. Every prospect and player has their issues. Would you rather be talking about a potential distraction for a dude that's hanging with the wrong crowd or, has gotten into some off-court stuff where maybe his habits aren't the best? I can live with a TikToker with some of these other options that we've seen pop up from now to time. So I get everyone's got their distractions, vices, hobbies, however you want to put it. TikTok one, not too bad in the grand scheme of thing here.
Well, it's the number 2 overall pick just 2 years ago was being discussed, dropping a gun off, so on and so forth. So yeah, we gotta be honest with it. Yeah, the kid likes Panic at the Disco. I love it. That's a great song. It's really catchy, and darn well you sing that every time you hear it in the car. Anyways, let's talk about the basketball player. First of all, Sixers on the clock. The board's playing out all sorts of wildness. There's players available that are really, have great potential. Of course, Dalton Knecht is a name that we discussed. I didn't think Dalton Knecht was falling out of the top 10. There he was. I think Dalton Knecht comes in and it can immediately help a team. There are more pluses to his game, but this is the one guy that was right there and, of course, immediately taken by the Lakers following him. Jared McCain, can he step in day one and help this team? What are his strengths? What are his weaknesses?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes, that he can step in day one and help the Sixers team. I won't lie to you and say at the moment I was rooting for Dalton Knecht to be the pick, and I do think that's more of an immediate impact player. But Jared McCain's a little bit of swings both directions, that he can be a day one impact guy. His shooting is going to be a defining quality at the NBA level from day one. He truly is like a high level elite shooter. Shot 41.4% from three this year on high volume. We're talking over 5 attempts per game. He had, I believe it was 8 games this year where he made multiple 3-pointers. He had 8 3-pointers against JMU in the tournament, lit them up for 30-plus points, scored 22 in the first half. He's got like a level of shooting that can change a game. Like there will be moments this year in which Jared McCain comes in, rips 4 or 5 3-pointers and a half, and everything turns on its head. He's that level of shooter. The skepticism comes with playing with Tyrese Maxey and sharing the floor. He is 6'3". He is not. I don't have much optimism that there's that much growth there. He's got a strong frame. He competes. I think he's more passable defensively than people give him credit. And the other side of things is like he's going to be a guy that grows in the long term. And from the Sixers' perspective here, with so many questions for where this roster is going, I do think part of the calculus was leaning into if we need to repackage this guy in a trade. Jared McCain's a more universal prospect than a guy like Dalton Knecht, but I'm happy with him. I want to see him in a Sixers uniform and do hope he sticks around. So I do think I ultimately give it a B+, but very happy with the pick.
I like that. Definitely something that I did not come across. Got to think down the road if there is a package deal. This obviously moves the needle a little bit more than Dalton Knecht. Dalton Knecht fell for a reason. Of course, he's a little older. You know, there's plenty of minuses that you can mix in for Dalton Knecht, as I just said, with the age, 1, supposedly the agent, 2. And you know what? He's played 5 years of college basketball. This was his best season. I did like his game. And again, putting that to the side, it's not even about Dalton Knecht. It's just really the reason why I bring that up is because you know me. We did a show this whole season. I was a fan. I watched Tennessee. I almost bought Dalton Knecht's jersey off of DH Gate after the tournament, and the reason why was because I said if Tennessee, when we were filling out our bracket, I had Tennessee going to the Final Four, if I'm not mistaken, or the Elite Eight, and I said if Dalton Knecht gets him to the Final Four, I'll buy his jersey. You know, look, there's obvious reasons why I would like his game, so on and so forth, but he was a baller. McCain is too, though, and it's about fit with this team, and it's specifically with Tyrese Maxey. The fit there. Are we talking about he's coming in starting at the 2? Is like what happens next with Jared McCain if he is with this team come September, come October, game 1, NBA regular season? Is he immediately starting? Is he that good? Does he have to work into it? Give us the projection right now with McCain in the Sixers year 1.
So obviously the Sixers still have a lot of work to do on the roster, and that's going to change this to an extent. I think ultimately it's more likely that he is more of a 6-man come off the bench type guy, at least in the short term. I do definitely see a world where he grows into a starting caliber guard. I think he's more cut from that combo guard type frame than a true point guard. But the thing that I will give him credit for, far more than the 1.9 assists per game that he produced, that like indicates he's a guy that knows how to run an offense. Like he has a feel for when he needs to get guys involved, when he needs to get his own, when it's his time to take over. There is like that true like point guard / leader feel that you have to his game. That's really impressive. That even dates back to his high school tape and stuff like that, where he's had success at every single level he's played at. He is a guy that seems to be a leader of men to an extent, which I don't think people are giving him enough credit for. I think there's a world where him and Tyrese Maxey, neither one of them end up being true point guards, but they can do like the combo guard type role together. And again, I do think he's a better defender than he's gotten credit. I get he's 6'3", but he's competitive, he's strong, he's physical. I like the way that he plays on both ends of the floor. So I see a world where him and Maxey work together far more than people are giving it credit.
A lot of positives on the timeline. You don't see that often with the 16th overall pick, everybody coming to agreement. And I'm not going to sit here and say it was universal, but a lot of people I respect when it comes to the college basketball game. One gentleman who's been on this show, Brian Bevo. He is a Duke fan. He said he fits the system so much more than Dalton Knecht, the perfect complement to Maxey. That backcourt, quote, will have the highest aura in the NBA. Philly wants a guy who hustles, lays it all on the line, and gives a you-know-what. This is the one. I love that. Of course, Mark Henry Jr. waking up and saying something like along the lines that he had like dreams about him last night.
Yeah, he was his number one option from start to finish, Mark Henry Jr.
Interesting. What was I guess I should call it Mark, but what was his big reason why?
So what a lot of Mark's mindset here is like when you look at the Sixers' shortcomings and year out, it's never been their defense. Like for the concerns about the defensive situation here, it's always been they don't have enough ways to score the ball. They don't have enough other options. That's what Jared McCain's going to be able to do from day one. Like his shooting is a defining trait that will keep him at the NBA level. You can have questions about the other stuff if he can play make at a high enough level. If he is defensively an issue, he's a very good rebounding guard for his size, despite being just 6'3", averaged 5 rebounds per game. And like you felt those rebounds that like he's in the mix. They're tough, physical. He plays hard. Like it is kind of funny to me that he is like this TikTok paint his nails kind of poster boy. Cause if you just watch him play, like he is all hustle. He is all heart. He's leaving it out there. You're like from start to finish, that dude is locked in playing basketball at a high level, which I love to see. So from Mark's perspective, I think he's very much buying in on the offense, and there's good reason for that to be the case.
Sean, what was the mock draft? I was having we just talked about this for the past week and then some. What were some of the mocks that had him? It was a shock that he fell, right?
Yeah, I know Maury said they had him pegged as a top 10 pick. He was kind of mocked in the range. I saw several mocks having him connected to the Sixers. I do think it's a fit there. It wouldn't have been a shock if he went like 8th or 9th in this draft. Also wouldn't have been a complete shock if he fell a little bit further. I saw him as late as 19 in some, but he was very much in this Sixers range. So not a huge surprise there. I do think he should have been off the board sooner than when the Sixers picked him. So happy he was around for sure.
The 4th Duke freshman guard taken top 20 in the NBA draft ever. That's something to say there. And yeah, look, it's really eye-opening when Daryl Morey, and I'll give him some truth. I'll give him some credit when he does speak the truth, and he does a lot. I don't think he holds back. You have to at times, but there's been plenty of situations over the years that Daryl Morey has hopped on the radio airwaves and spit the truth, and of course podcasts, so on and so forth. And I thought he was telling the truth last night with what you just said. We had him pegged at the top 10 pick. He fell. It was a no doubt, and I love that. Like they got their guy at the end of the day, correct?
Yeah, I think so. And the way that Maury talks about him, for sure, there are the trade implications. And like, obviously, this could change if the right opportunity presents itself. But he certainly was not talking about McCain as a guy that they picked as like, an asset or a guy that they look to be moving on. That there was a great deal of excitement of Maury speaking that we believe this guy can make a year one impact. We have some higher hopes for him beyond. And if you want a really crazy stat here to get excited about, for starters, you look at the per 100 numbers. It's pretty much identical to what Devin Booker produced in college. And this stat right here, this is from David Murphy. He says there are 2 freshmen in NCAA history with a 61.1% plus true shooting percentage, 210 plus 3-point attempts, and 150 plus rebounds. Those players are Jared McCain and Steph Curry.
Damn.
Yeah.
That is a hell of a stat. All right. Again, look, we no one's gonna talk. Well, I take that back because everyone does have a take on it, but a lot more people are going to blow this up and make them out to be a great selection and all that. And the size is definitely a little bit of an eye opener. But if he's there to shoot at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And he just fills it up. Steph Curry is a hell of a comp. Is there a comp in your mind? I know people get frustrated and upset when we throw that out there. Good grief. I can only imagine his mentions after that. What's your comp, though? What were you saying about him on the way into this draft?
Yeah, I've seen some Seth Curry comps that's a little bit more light there. I think he's more physically commanding than Seth. Like, he's way more physical. He's like, when you watch Jared McCain drive the basketball, he's like a contact initiator that he's putting his shoulder down. He's getting into guys. He can finish across all angles. And defensively, he's really impactful. Like, he had over a steal per game. His hands are active and he's physically imposing again. Like, he's getting up in your space here. To give an NBA player, Fred VanVleet's probably the number one guy that I see some. And for what it's worth, there was a great deal of success with Fred VanVleet under Nick Nurse in Toronto. So a pretty good comp there, if that's something that makes sense. I think VanVleet's probably the closest thing, but I do think he's a little bit like a very unique blend of a basketball player. So I think there's not a perfect player to truly model his game after.
All right. Well, a lot still up in the air. We don't know what's next as far as how they're filling this team out. Plenty of roster spots available. Could a trade take place? I definitely do agree. I see the vision a little bit more that you can possibly package him up a little bit more enticing for general managers out there than a guy like Dalton Connect, which kind of needed to win now mode. One thought, though, I do want to put this out there with all the other nonsense that is following him. Look, at this day and age, nothing scares me, nothing shocks me. Kids, fun. Like Caleb Williams, same thing. Williams, the one thing that bothered me about Williams is he would draw FU against the team he was playing. I'm like, come on, man, you don't need that. Like, that's a little over the top, but you want to paint your nails, I don't care. I will say this, though. I didn't really see anybody losing their mind over it. It's just funny how that works on social media. First thing is like, oh, WIP callers are going to have a field day. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, please, like, I've had enough of that radio station, and I'm mentioning them right now. Who cares what they say? We know those callers are idiots, whatever. The other thing that hits me is, like, I didn't see anybody say, like, oh, he paints his nail, I don't want that guy on my team, whatever. I just want to put this out there. Like, we think we're big and bad here in Philly, and I understand, being a part of it for the last 20 plus years, we can be. That dude played basketball at Duke and did all of that. So I got news for you. All right. He's heard everything and then some from the Carolina fans, from the NC State fans, from anybody else in college basketball. So I'm pretty sure he's comfortable in his skin. I'm not concerned about that. I'm excited. Kid's got, some riz to him, right? I think I could say that here, and he could fill it up. So that's what I'm really excited about. We'll see what happens next for the 76ers. We're going to talk about round 2. But before we do that, let's go ahead and keep it going as far as round 1 from last night. First things first, Sean, normally I'm one of these guys that pushes back. Oh, this is going to be a terrible draft class. You hear that a lot. And it's like, all right, you tell me these sort of things, but hold up. Like, we know darn well at the end of the day, there's 30 players picked. There's going to be a couple players that produce that nobody thinks. There's going to be a couple players that are kind of duds that people expected a little bit more from, so on and so forth. Dude, I don't know. I think they might be spot on with this draft class. The number 1 overall pick, there was zero buzz. Like, what are we talking about with the number 1 overall pick? Is he a good player? Why was there not more buildup behind him? Are we lazy because he was across seas? Like, what's happening there? That is crazy. Nobody even knows how to pronounce his name except for you, which you correctly did last week.
Yeah, so Zachary Risacher is the dude's name here. Played over in France. And by the way, even last night we have shout out Frank Mason, who I love, old school Kansas player who I believe he had a cup of coffee in the NBA, but was never able to stick around. But him tweeting out immediately after the draft of Frank Mason playing in the same league in France right now, and just said that young man is not the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. So pretty funny there. Not a great sign either. The bigger storyline to me, I'm not a guy that's a Risacher guy. I think he's fine. He's you're going to know exactly what he is to an extent as a role, that he's going to be a 3-and-D guy. He's a 6'10" shooter that can defend pretty well on ball, but that's about it. That he's not going to be taking guys off the dribble. He's not going to be playmaking. And to me, I think that's kind of short-sighted that that's the number 1 overall pick you're going with there. I think the bigger storyline as it pertains to the Hawks is they essentially got bullied out of taking who is perceived as the best player in this draft in Alex Sarr, who refused to work out for Atlanta. I find it really strange that he did all this effort to force himself to the Washington Wizards of all places, that I think you just want to objectively look at it. Like, the Hawks aren't a model of how you want to run a franchise, but I think they got a leg up from Washington based on past results. So I was kind of surprised by that. I don't love Risacher. I still think this draft has a lot of guys that still will have impactful careers, but this is certainly a role player draft. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, look, I'm not Stephen A. I'm not paid $25 million to get on television and go, who? Which was crazy, but that's the world we live in. There was a lot of players that I was like, first of all, the one thing that hit me last night was, how big is Monica McNutt? She was just taller than half of those guys out there. I know she played ball, and I'm pretty sure she is a little tall, but at the end of the day, some of these guys weren't really all that big. And then you see the videos and you're like, all right, who are half of these guys? Even Tansy was checking in, and Joe Tansy knows college basketball. So there were a lot of foreign players taken. Yeah. What is your take on France right now? I think 4 players were taken in last night's first round. Of course, with Wemby last year. Batum. We know there are French players in the NBA, but to have that many taken in the first round, that was eye-opening. What's your take on that?
Yeah, 3 of the first 6 players selected coming from France there. That being Zachary Risacher, Alex Sarr, and then Tijan Salon down at 6 to Charlotte there. There was a ton of international options last night. And I do think like that speaks to the growth of basketball. This is not an overnight takeover that has certainly been trending this direction. I think even moving forward, we're going to look at almost half and half, like America versus international. When you look at the selection, I don't think this is something that is changing. I think there's been that much growth overseas. And it's also, there's guys that like Alex Sarr, for example, here is an American born player who took his talents to France, that he bounced around, and that was the path to the draft that he elected to take. There's guys like that as well. So I think that just speaks to the growth of basketball, and it's something I don't see changing. So maybe the scouting's got to catch up a little, get a little more widespread or whatever. But I think that's just what we're looking at.
This is gonna sound stupid, but that's all right. I don't hold back. Is it all one league over there? Like, did Wemby play against all these guys last year?
Some of
Or
them. It's not as directly connected from that. Like Tajon Salon, who's the guy who went 6th to the Charlotte Hornets. He's a guy who played with Wemby, that they have a relationship. I don't believe on the professional team that they played together, but they had been training together in France and kind of grew up playing in the basketball circles together. So there are some connections there. That's a large reason why there was some talking points with Reese Shea too, is they at least had some sort of relationship with Wemby and him going to the Spurs, that type of thing. So not quite as linear. There's a lot more like higher levels, lower levels of leagues and that types of things overseas. So you got to kind of do your research on each individual one, but it will be interesting to see how that filters out.
all right, let's go to the draft last night. Reed Shepherd, 3rd overall. When that selection happened, what was your immediate reaction?
I think he's a good fit for Houston. Fred VanVleet, who I just mentioned as a McCain comp, he's down there on a pretty short-term deal at this point. So I think Reed Shepherd is going to be essentially the long-term Fred VanVleet replacement. Shepherd's a guy that, like, in a draft full of uncertainties, you know what his role and what he can do is type thing. He's the guy that is McCain's competition for the best shooter in this year's draft. And they do a lot of similar things. I honestly believe in McCain's defense a little more, but there is an argument to be made that Shepherd is another level of like just shooter and a guy that like offensively that he can create off the dribble a little more, a little better playmaker. And there are people that would fight me on that defense take. That I think Shepherd's a little bit more of a steals and blocks merchant, that he does get his hands in, jumps passing lanes. He's not as much of a slide your hips, move your feet, and stick with the guy as I think McCain will do. But I think it is a good fit for Houston. If either Reese Shea or Sarr had fallen, I think they would have gone that direction. But it didn't make a ton of sense for them to go with Klingon there, and we saw him slide a little bit. So I like that for Houston.
Shepherd could possibly end up in Phoenix.
Could happen.
Possibly.
You never know.
Yeah, could happen. No, and the one eye-opening deal with Shepherd was when Orion Beef Coyle at the combine was putting some stats out, and like, wait, what? Didn't he have the highest vertical at the combine?
And like the dude shot 52% from 3 this year. Like that's crazy numbers.
That's stupid. That's just stupid. Yeah. So of course, if you're an NBA general manager, you want that, but we'll see if he's able to do it at the next level. Castle from UConn, a hell of a pick there. Ron Holland, Klingon falls to 7th to the Blazers. Dillingham was a guy that dropped a little bit. I know some people were possibly talking about him being picked a little higher. And then the surprise of the night, Zach Edey, top 10. We discussed it a couple of months ago when we were debating whether or not first round.
Yeah.
He goes top 10. Sean Barnard, out of all those names I just threw your way, what was the one that caught your attention the most?
Yeah, I think you nailed it bringing up Edey there. And probably the talking point to this is there was a ton of smoke leading up to the draft for Memphis's interest in Donovan Klingon. Klingon ultimately got picked one selection before going to the Portland Trail Blazers. I do think that they need a big man down there in Memphis, that Jaren Jackson Jr. plays his best version of basketball when there's a true center behind him, where he can be kind of more of that roaming power forward. So they went with Zach Edey as that version, that guy. I think Klingon would have been a much cleaner fit, a guy that would have been a just straight up better basketball player for that team. I'm very interested to see what the Edey experience is. I am a Zach Edey believer in the long term, but I think he's a guy that like is very niche in the way that you can use him. He was the guy approaching the draft that it was the widest range of where he could be selected. I did not think we'd be hearing him get picked in the top 10 by any means.
The ultimate beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, I could talk myself into Edey with the Sixers at 16, not even Sixers, put that to the side, but as high as 16, as high as 15. I didn't see top 10. Yeah. Did not see top 10. So somebody fell in love with some metrics and look, the fit, right? Like, okay, you got size. You immediately have some serious size down there at the rim. And defensively, that's going to be tough for teams. I just need a little bit more from a top 10 pick. I don't know. We'll see. I am fascinated by that selection. And of course, the Memphis Grizzlies. I think that's a pretty smart organization. They built a nice team. They got Ja Morant. Is that going to work out for them in your mind?
They're going to have to find a way to make it work. Like, Edie's going to be, I think the best way to use him is probably as like a guy off the bench who's an ultimate change the pace of a game. Like a guy that's a bruiser that you throw in there for 5 to 10 minutes, give him a couple touches in the post, let him use his size. You cannot teach 7'4", and he does have like legitimate nice touch around the basket. He's not just big. Like there is some aspect to skill that he has. Good free throw shooter for his size, which is really rare. Hovered around 80% there. There is some hope he can develop a little bit of a jump shot because of those reasons. So I think we will have these Zach Edey nights where he pours in a nice like 18 and 10 in a short period of time. It's just going to be the NBA adjusting to Zach Edey as much as Zach Edey's adjusting to the NBA.
Like that. It's a good call by you. All right. Then we go to the teens, and we got Serbia, we got G League, we got Cody Williams from Colorado, who was a hell player. Colorado had the 2 players drafted in the first round, and that was something we discussed heading into March Madness with the eyes on Colorado. They played in the first 4 and they had 2 top 20 picks. That's pretty cool at the end of the day. And then you go into Providence and Pittsburgh with Carter and Carrington, both of them really good players. I'm more familiar with Devin Carter than I am Bub Carrington, but your thoughts on the fit with where they ended up. I really do like Carter with Sacramento, though.
Yeah, I really like the Carter pick for Sacramento. We saw last year how impactful Keon Ellis was for that Kings team, being like a defensive-minded guard, especially playing off guys like De'Aaron Fox. And when you have a big man like Domas Sabonis, who's never going to be a huge plus defender there, having these types of like guards that impose themselves is really appealing to me. And I think Devin Carter, to an extent, is like a more evolved version of Keon Ellis, that I think he's going to be even more physical, even more commanding as a rebounder, and a guy that can still shoot the ball pretty well. So I really like that fit for Sacramento. And Bub Carrington, probably the guy that was the biggest riser in this entire draft, that he was basically talked about as like a fringe first-round pick for most of this. By the time leading up to last night, like it was pretty much set in stone he was going to be a lottery pick, which was surprising to me. Spent 1 year at Pittsburgh. I believe he's the youngest guy in the draft. If not, he's one of the youngest. He's still 18 years old, spent 1 and done at Pitt, ran more pick and rolls than anybody in all of college basketball last year, 12.6 per game, which he produced at over 1.1 points per possession. Really high efficiency there. And if we're just going to call it like that, if you can produce at that level of pick and roll at the NBA level, there's a place for you. He's 6'5". He's got a little bit of springiness and athleticism to him. I do like Bub Carrington. So cool to see him rise as much as he did. I didn't fully expect to hear his name there, but shout out to Bub for getting all the way up to 14 there.
What a name. Love that name too. Great name.
And his true name's Carlton. He goes by Bub. I give him far more style points by going by Bub for sure. He's higher on my list as Bub Carrington than Carlton Carrington for sure.
Sean Barnard, all things picks and roll we're talking about. We'll get to the Sixers in the second round here. We'll put a bow on the first round. Biggest surprise from last night was what?
Biggest surprise, probably Zach Edey. If I'm going to go a little bit different, Matas Buzel has fallen all the way down to 11. I was really surprised by. I think that's a cool place for him. He's a Chicago kid, so he gets to stay out there, represent the Bulls, and that's the type of swing that the Bulls should be taking. That I think there's a world where this guy can turn into an all-star, which I think there's several names above him that I don't feel that way about. So surprised to see him fall all the way out of the top 10. I think the Bulls got a good one in Buzelis there.
All right. Next question is there another Villanova player that the New York Knicks can draft? Is there any Nova players? I kid. Best available right here, right now. Second round gets started this evening. Best available in your mind?
Probably Kyle Filipowski would be my answer there. Jared McCain's teammate at Duke. I think people have soured on him a little bit more than probably should be the case. That was my hot take prediction leading into last night, is that he would fall out of the first round completely. That ultimately did prove to be the case there.
Nice
but I do think like he will be a guy that finds his role in the NBA. There's enough supplementary skills that he's just a smart player, knows what to do with the basketball. There are concerns about like the positional fit and all that, but I like him. Also throw a little bit of love to Johnny Furphy, who I'm pretty fond of. He's only 18. He's another guy who's like a home run swing that's going to take a couple years, but pretty crazy athletic, shockingly athletic for a dude that like does not look the part by any means, but he is real deal size, can shoot it a little bit. He had a really hot stretch, which really inflated his draft stock and kind of cooled off after. But Johnny Furphy and Kyle Filipowski, probably my top options there.
Where was Filipowski mocked?
In like late teens to early 20s was kind of the general consensus there. He did seem to be a guy circled as a potential faller, but I saw a lot, and especially throughout all of the season, he was expected as like a fringe lottery, late lottery type guy.
Yeah, look, there were games with Duke this past year that I bit my tongue that I didn't hit send on those tweets, but I did like him. I did. Yeah, I thought he played really well with Duke, and he was hungry, and he was a man against boys in some games. The next level's tough though, right? Like
Yeah.
I can't sit here. I felt more passionate about Grayson Allen, tough comp, obviously Duke. That's the reason why I'm bringing it up. But I was a little bit more vocal on Grayson Allen being at the next level. I don't know if I see it all that much. Absolutely different players, different positions, all that. But I really bit my tongue on Filipowski. We'll see where he ends up, and ultimately, I'm sure he can play. But the situation is going to matter really a lot with him and where he ends up. All right, so kicking off the second round here. Let's see here. Rounds number 2 coming your way, and we open up with Toronto, Utah, Milwaukee, the Blazers. The Philadelphia 76ers will go 11th in round number 2, which is a 41 overall. I'm not going to ask you to give me a player, but where do you think they should target? If there's anything, is it best available at this point in time in your mind? Is there a player off the top of your mind that you want to see them go and get? How do you approach that pick? Should they trade up and go get a guy?
Yeah, I don't think they'll trade up. I think they're going to sit pretty and make a pick here. The Daryl Morey thought process behind drafting is essentially you sit back and let the best available player come to you, and whoever that is, you take. And we saw another example of that last night with Jared McCain. That was the Tyrese Maxey pick, the Jaden Springer pick. That's the way that Morey kind of drafts. So I don't expect anything different here. I think you take a little bit more of a home run swing in the second round, which is a non-guaranteed deal. You can cost control that a little better, and ultimately you got your guy that you expect to be an immediate impact player in Jared McCain. I like swinging for the fences a little bit here. Couple names I like. If Bobby Klintman's on the board from Sweden, I would love him. Played a year at Wake Forest. I actually fell in love with his game at that point. He was only like a 5-point per game scorer, but he was just all over the place. He's long. He's got like 7'4" wingspan or something crazy that he doesn't feel all the way coordinated, but he's a guy that is intriguing as like that archetype of a true wing player. Tyler Smith from the G League Ignites, interesting. Kevin McCullough Jr. from Kansas is intriguing. Justin Edwards out of Kentucky, I think, would probably be the top name that I would throw out there. Is he's a player that I think is going to outperform his draft slot by a pretty significant margin. It wouldn't have shocked me if he snuck into the first round last night, but Edwards was a dude who was one of the top 5 recruits in last year's class and was outplayed by his own teammates and Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepherd. So I think Justin Edwards has a game that translates better at the NBA level than college. So that's a name that I probably have circled for sure.
All right. Got the draft. We're off and running here. And summer league right around the corner. And then who knows, man, training camp fast approaching, all that and more. All right. Anything else from the NBA draft you want to get off your chest, Sixers or league wide?
Nothing too crazy for me. I think like last night was nobody had any clue. There were a couple late swings that I was disappointed in. Some second round targets that I had penciled in for the Sixers. Pacome Dadiat that was drafted by the Knicks. Dylan Jones by the Wizards. AJ Johnson even's intriguing, and Jalen Tyson, who I knew was Mark Henry Jr.'s guy. So I think there was, and Baylor Shireman, I love. There was a late swing of picks that I was a little frustrated went off the board, but you know, it is what it is. Sixers got Jared McCain, so can't complain too much.
Good pick by the Celtics to close out round 1.
Definitely. I love Shireman. Yeah. He didn't have a lot of first round buzz. So he was a guy that I think I was personally higher on than consensus. He's a winner. He's going to find a way to stick in the NBA, makes all the right plays and shoots the ball incredibly well. Nice little lefty stroke there. So I like Shireman.
And when you win the championship, you can go ahead and take swings like that at 30 overall. And, we'll see how it plays out for the Celtics. All right. NBA as a whole. You and I didn't talk yesterday. So the Knicks go out and get Mikal Bridges. Where are we at right now with that move? And of course, OG signs the deal. Man, they're all in, Sean, and it's not like I see it both ways, right? Like I can definitely take a shot at it. I could tell you that, yeah, like you're all in, and you got some good players, but you're banking on chemistry at the professional level. Where, in my mind, you need all stars. You need guys that are just superstars out there. They have a lot of really good players. They raised their value this past year. They played to heights that people didn't think Dante DiVincenzo could play at. And of course, Josh Hart, but will they be there this upcoming season? I think they will be. I do. I believe in that chemistry. I believe that fighting for each other. I believe that Michael Bridges is a better player than when he was with Phoenix versus what he was with Brooklyn. And there's a reason, because Brooklyn stinks. But now you're putting him in the Garden with that team. I think he's going to raise his level. Of course, you have to add in the injury factor. Can you bank on Brunson being healthy for the entirety of the season, plus OG? Like I said, you could take shots, but at the end of the day, they were moving in the right direction. And I think this move pushes them even more in that direction. Where do you stand on that move?
Yeah, I totally get it. Mikal Bridges is a very good player and a guy that you can plug and play on any basketball team on the planet, any NBA team, he's going to fit his role. I am a little skeptical the more I digested it of you just traded a lot for Mikal Bridges, who's a guy who definitely is not a top 20 NBA player, probably not even like a top 30, top 40. If we really want to dive into and getting out the names there, he's good. He's going to be more important to the Knicks than he would have been in a lot of locations. It's frustrating from the Sixers angle of this is another potential option that is pulled off the plate here by Bridges being sent to New York. But I do think that essentially they've built a role player super team. And I am a little skeptical of that being championship material there. That I really am a believer that you need a top 6 player in the NBA to win a championship. And I don't see one on their roster. And even Jalen Brunson, as good as he is, I don't think he can go any higher than was the case last year. That was the peak Jalen Brunson for me. He might be able to maintain that. But the bottom line, he's not going to grow overnight. And I don't think either of these guys are the ideal sidekick either. The gamble is essentially that I think Bridges can be a number 2 on a championship team. I don't know if I fully feel that way. I think his best role is as a number 3 on a team. And I don't think DiVincenzo or Hart are even playing to the level they did last year or better than that moving forward. So I am a little skeptical of this next team. I respect that they did swing for the fences and continue to get better after having the success in the playoffs. But you're banking on a lot of chemistry and everything clicking for this team to really achieve the heights that they're hoping.
Role player super team. Put it on a t-shirt. I like that. If they do get the job done, I would imagine there's going to be a parade up there on the main line. It's crazy that all these Nova players are there. It's just shocking. They're definitely going for it. And for a team that hasn't been worth the damn for years up until recently, yeah, I understand it. I get it. And they're all in. They were able to make it happen because of the contracts and Brunson not taking that crazy amount of money, and you connect the dots. It's surprising that they were able to keep OG. That's a big deal. If he can stay healthy, of course, that's his big, his big X mark on him. But bottom line is, I get it, and I'm definitely entertained by it. But I don't know if it's going to get you to a championship.
Yeah,
and that's are we talking about the second round? Or are we talking about winning it all? And I get it. It's a great story, and it will definitely have us entertained and tuned in. And it looks like it's a lot of fun to play for the Knicks. But when it comes to playoff time, are we talking about a team that can win a championship? Long way to go till we get into that conversation. But right here, right now, still some questions that need to be answered. Bam, 3 years, 166 with the Miami Heat.
Yeah.
It's not surprising. It's just, dude, the contracts that these players are getting are crazy now. That's the eye opener. It's Jason Capono, when he played for the Sixers, there's a pull. I just used to laugh because it was my always go-to. When he played, he came off the bench barely, and he made $6.5 million. I'm like, that's the job I want. I want that job, Jason Capono. Jason Capono comes out of retirement, steps on the floor. He's making $20 million to do what he did in that season. It's crazy. A lot of money to be made right now, but Bam's a damn good player too, though.
Yeah, and for sure, a building block for that Heat team. I'm not shocked by it. I've never been the biggest Bam Adebayo guy. I think that there are some limitations to his game. I don't think he can be a number 1 on a team for sure. And I think probably not a number 2, offensively for sure not. He is an incredible defender. I get that you got to pay the man. The bigger story to me is that there's still been no progress on a Jimmy Butler extension while Bam's getting his money there. And for what it's worth, it essentially was reported straight up that Jimmy's just going to play out the length of his contract this year. So he's got $48.7 million that he's making this year. Speaking of a ton of money, then a $52 million player option for next year. So Butler's going to play out this season and see what happens from there. So have that one circled a little bit in our star watching kind of mindset.
Apparently Jimmy Butler played in a poker tournament. I saw that. And He ended up
Ryan
winning
Garcia.
he ended up winning a huge pot and then immediately cashed out, which is a no-no. You got to stick around a little bit and give the people at the table an opportunity to maybe take some of that away. But apparently Jimmy Butler stepped out, won the money, and then was handing money out, and people were talking smack about him at the table. It's probably not a good idea. But anyways, Jimmy Butler going to play, and I never expected him to force his way out of Miami. What the hell do you want to leave Miami for? He is Miami.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I've given up trying to figure out exactly what makes Jimmy Butler beat either. So he could, on a whim, say, you know what, I want back in Philadelphia. I want to go to Los Angeles or whatever the case may be. So he is a wild card to that extent. So not fully rolling it out, but yeah, it does seem like he's gonna be sticking in Miami at least for now.
All right, final one, back over to Sixers for me. And this is one thing that I said yesterday. I get it. It's this time where we're going to read everything and we're going to believe everything is gospel, and I'm fine with that. Matter of fact, I did say this yesterday, just so you know. I don't care if Sean Barnard hopped on these airwaves and told you this is what he's hearing. Like, you can't believe everything you're hearing at this point in time. And I said that specifically to a report that was put out there, I believe by Kyle Neubeck, that said that if there's nothing there, then Morey could do what he's done previous years with Harden and Simmons, hold up, wait to the deadline, get further into the season, whatever it may be. I know Harden happened before the season, if I'm not mistaken, or first 2 weeks. Early in the season, but Simmons was later. And I get it. It makes sense, but it's frustrating to read that. And I don't know if I'm giving that a thumbs up. By no means. Like, I want them to go out there and get players, but if nothing is available and you plan and you're going to get fleeced, if you're Daryl Morey, you can't. So with that report specifically, is there any truth behind that in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that only happens if like the Sixers absolutely strike out. Like, it's certainly plan A is attack right now, find a way to build this roster into a contender. I also kind of have a philosophical disagreement with Morey's stance on like the deadlines when it's a finished product. I think when you're moving as significant pieces of players like James Harden or like Jimmy Butler or Brandon Ingram or whoever the name may be, it takes a little time for them to gel within the concept of a team there. So I think it's important to have an entire season for guys to figure out how to play with each other. I think Morey more so views it as you bring enough talent and they'll work itself out, which I understand. Obviously, you want more talent than not, but I think it's a bit more gamble than he gives it credit there. Ultimately, I think the Sixers find a way to take some sort of half step. I continue to hear a lot of Brandon Ingram smoke, and I still think ultimately that probably ends up being part of the move there. And let's also make note that free agency does not officially begin until Monday. So that's when I really expect these talks to heat up for what the Sixers are going to be doing there. It's definitely possible. It's definitely not ideal. I do think Morey's going to work every single option and every single phone line to make sure that's not the case. But if there's not an offer at the table, and when you consider guys like Mikal Bridges are getting 5 first-round picks and a pick swap, like, it's tough to be super optimistic on building a contender if that's the going rate for some of these players.
Yeah, Julian Edlow from DraftKings joined me yesterday, and he was like, look, I get the Nova deal, or the Knicks deal called Nova. But he's like, the thing that hit me the most was Caruso didn't catch any picks, and Mikal Bridges, and I go, 31 versus 26, 27, whatever Bridges is. Yeah, still though, you would think that they would have got something more in return. It is crazy. They gave up a ton for Bridges, a ton to get him, but we'll see how that plays out. Great
and
stuff, Sean.
The other piece of that there is like from the Sixers angle, when you are making these trades, is like the reason the Caruso deal happened is that the Bulls are a team that never wants to slip into that true rebuild or true like being a bad basketball team, that they believe in Josh Giddey can at least keep them afloat a little bit. That's a young player that was of interest to them. That's where the value comes in for drafting a guy like Jared McCain, who could potentially entice some of these teams. Like a team like Utah has spoken about how they don't want to get worse. So if Lauri Markkanen is a name that the Sixers have circled, picks aren't going to be the overall deal that entice them. If Jared McCain's the guy that they like, then all of a sudden you get a little closer to a massive deal happening there. So I do think that there's value in players, and we're seeing that a little bit more. That picks have, to an extent, become like currency among NBA circles for paying for guys. Players hold a little bit different bargaining chip there. So just kind of food for thought on what teams are looking for.
Best in the business, and he is our insider for all things Sixers and the NBA right here in The Gambler, Sean Barnard. Sean_Barnard1 is where you can find him on socials. Picks and roll. You missed anything, get on over to foxphlgambler.com, where we have all of our podcasts available for you. Sean, enjoy night 2 of the NBA draft. Don't change the channel. Keep it locked. ESPN. There's 2 ESPNs. I know. Yeah, ESPN 1. I watched Stephen A for like picks 11 through 17. Was like, is this really their coverage? And I clicked it. I'm like, no, okay, obviously it's not. The other channel had Malik, had Jay Billis, had Woj. I'm like, what? I was stuck on Stephen A's broadcast, and I feel for Kevin Nagandi, but that was a tough watch, man. That was I was just like, what am I watching right now? And then the Knicks pick, and Stephen A has no idea what he's talking about. Nothing. He was just yelling the whole night, just yelling.
Yeah, that's how it goes. And also, by the way, tough look or tough situation for a guy like Kyle Filipowski. For the first time in history, gets invited to the green room, goes all the way without being drafted, and you got to come back the next day. That's tough there.
Do you? Do you really have to go back?
I don't know if you do. I saw a video of him leaving that he looked quite dejected and sad as expected. So definitely feel for the guy for that. But a tough situation to have to sit through all 30 and not hear your name called there.
Yeah, you want to be part of the league and you want to do right. I'll tell you, man, there's probably, like, if you told me that I wasn't a top 10 pick, if I knew I wasn't a top 10 pick, I'm probably staying home doing it with my family. Like Zach Edey did it, right? Looked like he was at the pool with his boys. It looked fun. It's supposed to be fun. And it will be fun. He's going to be drafted. But like you said, Filipowski now is the Aaron Rodgers of the draft. And it's like, you don't want to be that. You know, and the dude's getting drafted. There's nothing negative. But yet we created a negative because he went to the green room and he wasn't selected. It's just, it's tough. It's tough. But if I was an agent, I'd probably say top 10, cool. It's up to you. Anything after that, just go party with your family and the people that mean the most. I think that would probably be the best thing for everybody.
Yeah, I was listening to the Pat Bev pod, who was kind of talking about this. Pat, like his draft day experience, and he was talking about Patty Mills was like insistent on, I want to be at the draft room, and Patty Mills ended up like the 58th overall pick or something like that. So like barely was selected, but he got his moment. If he got to walk up, shake hands, do the pictures, the whole thing. And Pat was on the other side of things, being like, dude, I don't know if I'm hearing my name called. Like I don't want to be there if that's not the case. And ultimately, like he was also a second round pick. But I see both sides of it. Of like, that's obviously a very special and cool moment of hearing your name called, shaking hands, putting the hat on, walking across the stage, getting the full 9 there. But if it doesn't work out, like it's a tough spot. I would much rather have that like emotional breakdown and in the like presence of my family and myself rather than with cameras around and all that type of thing. So it's tough. It's a win if you get picked. It's a loss if you don't. It's a tough situation to be in.
Yeah, that really is. Where did Pat Bev go to college?
Arkansas.
Wow, that's a good pull by you. St. Mary's. I knew Patty Mills went to St. Mary's. I wasn't sure where Pat Bev went to college, though. Nice work by you. Sean Barnard, enjoy round 2 of the NBA draft. We'll be back tomorrow recapping it right here on another edition of Picks and Roll.